All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Everyone is in so far. My name is Danielle. Can you hear me? Can everyone? Okay. I'm the session keeper. We have Rashima Brightly, Candace Jackson, and Cam Gordon, who will be our speakers today. And I just want to give a few housekeeping notes that the session does have to end at 3:40 promptly. At 3:30, I will let you guys know that we have 10 minutes left. And then at 3:39, I will say thank you and we can end. And the speakers will share their contact information via chat. We'll also do the Q&A afterwards. So we'll let the speakers introduce themselves and tell us about themselves. And then we can do the Q&A afterwards at about 3:15 or so. So I will say, let's go ahead and jump off to Rashima if you'd like to get started.
Rashima, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Again, my name is Rashima Brightly. I've been within the independent school world for a little over 3 years now. I'm actually the founder of the Parents of Children of Color group at my son's school, my son is now is going to 3rd grade in the fall. So we're excited about that, and we've come a long way. I wanted to just share a little bit about how important it is for us to come into the space understanding the history that we bring into the space, the ancestors that we travel with into the space. I just want to share. Well, I'm not able to do that. There are some books that help to support that discussion that we need to have with our children. There's a book called, and I'll share this later on, Happy in Our Skin. Thank you. Sorry, give me 1 second. So it's called Happy. Can you see the screen? So yes. Happy in our skin. So before we can even talk about showing up, we need to be able to get into the space knowing who we are and what we can bring into the space and be proud to share that information. And so to be able to really do that, we need to understand our history, right? So being able to share history within our family first before we can take it out anywhere else. Because I realize a lot of times the challenges come up because we don't know who we are and we're not comfortable with who we are. So how can we share that with anyone else? And then we can share with others and not feel ashamed to do that, right? And then also remembering that we are part of that world as well as other worlds. I'll share a quick story. So September is Latinx month. We had an opportunity to work with the students for Black History Month, and now we're going to do the same for Latinx month. And when we asked the students what they wanted to do, most of what they shared was they wanted to replicate what was done for Black History Month. And to some degree that's good, but at the same time, remembering that there's a richness to all of our cultures that we can share. And so we gave them some ideas of what they can do, whether it be the virtual space or when we return back into the building, for them to consider. And they hesitated. And it seemed to me that their foundation of understanding the richness of their culture needs to shine more, and they shouldn't be afraid, and understanding that our voices matter when we're in those spaces, and showing up as well when we're in those spaces, and not being afraid to show up. You know, in 2 years of having the group that we have, we've been able to having all aspects of the school recognize and celebrate Lunar New Year, Black History Month, even down to the culinary team where they've created theme lunch to represent a different component of the African diaspora. So just remember to show up and be present. I'm gonna stop there and we switch gears to the next speaker.
So Candace, we have Candace Jackson, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am a parent of a 5.5-year-old, and we are entering the independent school community this coming fall. Well, we'll see, right? We've been in a public school setting for the last 2 years, and then when she was, well, including this year, and then when she was 3, we started in a parochial setting. I decided to engage in the process, engage in the search process, largely because, well, two reasons. The first of which is I have a lot of friends who are in the system, and they are compelling and, if not pushy, about why it's important to at least explore. And so, quite frankly, the process was one of exploration for me. I wanted to see what was out there, what opportunities we could potentially avail ourselves of. And then the second reason was because I knew that there are resources that, quite frankly, our public school, as much as I love it, just does not have the resources that would allow all of our kids to thrive. So I'll be frank and say, even to this day, I am quite conflicted about entering into the new school. I'm very excited about the school. I'm super excited about the choice and what the environment portends for my daughter and me. But as Dina was saying, and we didn't watch her whole session because we were preparing for our session, but as she was saying, one of her comments anyway, many of us feel, in as much as it's important for us to avail ourselves of this independent school environment, we would love to have our own, or we would love to be able to, if you are a part of a public school system, love to be able to have the public school system bring those same sort of resources to bear for all of our kids. And so I, quite frankly, I felt like I had one foot in and one foot out. I'm very involved in our public school, even to this moment, part of our school leadership team, PTA, all those good things. And I'm in it until I'm not anymore, even though we have accepted a place in an independent school. But that said, I decided to take the plunge and also go all the way to the end through to the acceptance, because I do want to make sure that every resource that I want to avail ourselves of, we have access to. And I also said yes, because I'm very clear about my place in the world. I'm very clear about my daughter's place in the world. And I think that the school that we've chosen is one that will be able to meet us exactly where we are and ensure that everything I desire as a parent, they can complement. I don't expect them to shape everything about her. I think that's my job as a parent, but I do expect them to complement what I create or what I instill in her. And things like academic rigor, social environment, I expect that all those schools will do this. I mean, I just feel like, that those are givens. But is she going to be in a place where she's nurtured and where she sees herself? So how many teachers are teachers of color? How many families of color, of course? All of those things were factors for me in choosing the school. And quite frankly, some of them had quotients higher than the school that we ultimately chose. But I felt like the entirety of the package was one that would blend well with us. And we'll see what happens. But I'm very confident about the choice, more than anything, because I'm confident about where we are as a family and the choices that I've made as a woman and the choices that I've made as a Black woman, to say, yes, we can do this, we will do this, and she'll be covered, she'll be protected. And as Gina said in her statements earlier, I'm prepared to walk in front of her, beside her, and behind her as we move forward.
Thank you. And so next up, we have Cam Gordon. And before Cam goes, let me just say, please feel free to write any questions in the chat so that we can open up the dialogue a little more and we can answer questions that you may have and just make it an organic conversation.
All right, awesome. Good afternoon, y'all. Hope that all of you are doing well. I sincerely hope that all of your loved ones are okay and doing okay in this really difficult time. I believe that we probably all need a collective sort of woosah. So I'm glad that Gina started off the way that she did. I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about myself and my story, because I think it helps to give some context in terms of, you know, why I'm here now and why I sort of pursued the independent school route for my daughter. So first off, I'll say I am a sort of proud Bronxite. Just like Dina, I was born and raised in the Bronx, daughter of immigrant parents. And, you know, my parents made all sorts of sacrifices to ensure that I had a quality, you know, educational experience. And while they didn't know much about the American school system, they certainly did their best. And so when it was time for me to go off to high school, I took 3 buses, often leaving before 6 a.m. to get to sort of my private all-girls Catholic school, where I had lots of opportunity, but I lacked a sense of belonging and acceptance. And so I received sort of the same whitewashed curriculum that I'm sure many of you received. And I also you know, didn't have an opportunity to explore my identity or to explore my culture, or even recognize those things as valuable. And I truly believe that this shouldn't be a luxury for our children. It should be a necessity. So in many ways, what brought me to the independent school space wasn't really about what I wanted. It was about what I didn't want for my daughter. And I didn't want to repeat the same cycle. As an educator myself, sort of starting an anti-racist school within the public school system sector, I knew all too well the pitfalls of that system. So I didn't want to enter into that with my daughter, sort of knowing what the experience was that I've had or the stories that I've heard. And I really wanted a space where she could show up authentically as she was, unapologetically, speaking truth to power, exploring her identity. I wanted her to understand what it meant to be an advocate for herself and others, especially Black and brown and marginalized people. You know, just for my own students, I want for her to be critically conscious, and I want her to interrogate systems in our country that, you know, benefit some while also hurting others. I think it's through that work of examining power structures that our students reclaim their own stories and change their communities in the process. I believe, you know, what has happened in our country over the course of the last days have been outrageous. And I also think it is an example of the social justice work that so many people have put down roots for are really coming to life. And so, you know, I think wherever oppression lives, so does resistance. And I think it's really important for our students and our babies to recognize this and understand this. While I am a sort of a new parent entering into the independent school space, my daughter is just going to be starting in pre-K this fall. As a person of color, I'm sort of outraged as to what's going on in this country. But it felt really good this week to get an email from her school expressing solidarity with Black and brown families, and talking about the action the school was taking by holding, you know, people of color meetings for students in the elementary school, and talking about age-appropriate ways to discuss what's happening in the world. And to me, this was a game changer. It reinforces for me the fact that my child can show up in this space and be unapologetically Black, and also not be afraid of that, and not sort of succumb to that sort of white supremacy culture that we all know too well.
Thank you so much, Cam. So if anyone has not had, well, we don't have any questions as of yet, but feel free if someone does have a question, they just haven't had a chance to type it in. feel free to throw out a question. Okay, I will throw out a question and I will ask.
I think I also have a question over here, I think, about what was the most important factor for choosing the school. So I would say for me, what was the most important factor was, being an educator. I think, I like to go into the space and feel it out. So I attended a lot of events before I made the decision about what schools to apply to. I really wanted to make sure that I had a sense of what was going on. And, sometimes the only way to figure out how things are at a school is to actually go to the barbecue, if you know what I mean. Like you get in there and see what's up. And so I went to a lot of events where I felt like it was very inclusive and people were having dialogue that to me was about belonging and creating space for Black and Brown students. And to me, that was really powerful and something I hadn't seen before.
I think it's equally important to make sure that the space is inviting for the families as well. So our children, yes, it's very, very important, but we're spending time there too. Right. And so we have to remember that. How is the space being carved out to be inviting for our voice as a parent? And if it's not, how do you create the environment so that it is welcoming for you? Do you find, if the school has a POC, a parent of color group, or do you create one? Do you find other families that you will network with to be able to navigate the space? Because it is a little terrifying for the parent as well, being the minority in such, in a space where there's mostly white folks. And most of the times our experiences are completely different. So we have to keep those elements in mind as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question, and my answer is probably really long, so I'll just offer a couple thoughts, and that is that there wasn't a factor for me. There was a confluence of factors, just like, our kids are multifaceted individuals, so too must be the space. And so having attended a lot of events, as Cam said, I think is also really important. But I also kept in mind that these are presentational opportunities for the school. So for me, there was always the desire to read the nuances and read between the lines and experience what was happening in that interstitial space, what was happening that wasn't the presentational moment. And so what was happening down the hall in the kitchen while there's a presentational moment happening, I'd be like, I'll be right back. I just walked down there. I was always walking around in places that nobody told me I should go. Wasn't prevented from going, but just sort of like, I just want to see. And at the end of the day, it was, what do I feel like this is a space I'm going to walk in and be happy to and comfortable with and confident in leaving my child every day. And after the also presentational moments, but still important, after the interview, what was happening in her body? Like, what was her energy like after having left this space? That was also really important. So it wasn't one or even three things for me. It was like a confluence of things. What is happening in the totality of this environment that makes me feel like, am I going to another dog and pony show, or am I going to another opportunity to dig deeper? And I think that even though the dog and pony shows are great, and I might have felt really strongly about a particular school with that information in my head, I still would be like, yeah, another event, or okay, good, I'm about to go learn some more, and so I had to be very thoughtful about what I said to myself pre and post.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting that you share that, Candace, because one of the things that we're doing now, and it's the first time ever, is the POCC is co-hosting an event for new families of color. And I think the event it's at the end of the week, actually. And I made it very clear that even though administration will be there in the beginning to talk about the different divisions. When we do the Q&A and the panel discussion, they have to leave the room, because it is important for myself and the diversity coordinator to have families feel very comfortable to ask questions that they probably wouldn't ask with administration present, so that they can feel comfortable coming in and know that the support is there. So all of those things are very, very, very important.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing. I think it's also important, having started the process last year, one of the things that I was really, really kind of, adamant about was showing up as I am. And so, at every meet and greet, at the interviews, I really posed the question about how do you create space for Black and Brown students to have a sense of belonging? And I did that purposely because I wanted to see what the answer was. I wanted to see, was it this kind of rehearsed answer? Were folks caught off guard by that question? And I got some of that. And I also got, really genuine and authentic responses where there was a plan in place. And I felt like, oh, okay, all right, we together. And in other spaces, where that didn't resonate with me, I knew my next steps. And
Right.
the same way, Candace, you spoke about that, like, you get it, you understand, you feel it.
So to answer a question about creating a POCC group, so you have to get the buy-in from administration, and for our school, it was more on the grassroots level. In fact, what sparked me wanting to create something was an event that happened at school. It was a lovely event and happens every year, but the organizer of the event, who's not a melanated person, decided, so it's an international festival that we do at the school every year. And he thought it was okay to put some drinks on the table not connected to that drink. So at the end of the event, myself and another parent went to speak to him because they do some activity, they do some performances as well. So he said to me, well, I've gone to such and such island and I was going to hire these folks on these sticks, and they threw up the baby and I thought it was wonderful. And I said, hold on a second. You mean stilts? Okay. I said, we are in New York City. The West Indian Day Parade takes place in Brooklyn. It is one of, if not the largest event that takes place in New York City in terms of festivals, right, on the street. You could have gone to Brooklyn and got a group from Brooklyn. Or better yet, you could have spoken to a lot of the staff that are from the Caribbean to ask them where to go. And that sort of sparked for me the need to have some conversations. So because of the fact that I understand the shoulders of which I stand on every single day of my life, I had a conversation with one of the administrators, and we just started brainstorming to figure out, should it be a group just for families of color? Should it be a group for families that understand the importance of diversity and inclusion? And it was important to have a group just for families of color because we have to carve out a space for ourselves because our experiences are different when we're in that space. If we have another group that brings everyone together that understands diversity and inclusion, that's fine. But you have to get the administration to be supportive. And when you have that in place, then you have another element. So for us,
I think we lost you.
the Values and Beliefs Committee, which is the umbrella for, all right, can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Okay. So the Values and Beliefs Committee oversees all the diversity, equity, and inclusion group. And I sit on that committee as well. And I said, in order for us to have the rest of the school follow what the inclusion statement says, we have to do stuff. we have to hold folks accountable. So when they do events, we need to ask them, have you thought about making sure it's inclusive and diverse? And if not, what do you think you could do differently with your next event so that it is? Right? So if you want others to come along, you have to be able to carve out almost like a roadmap. You know, when we just started our group, I had sleepless nights because I was fighting battles. Team, there were some battles that were coming to me. And I got to a point where I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to create a space that speaks to them that will be accepted by them. We're going to do the work that we know we're here to do, and either they join us or they don't. And now it's to a point where I have actually been asked to join that group to help them view things from a diversity lens. I was asked last year and I said no, because I wanted other members within our group to do that part, because we have a lot of great families at the school and we would support them. And so we supported them by voting, and that person's on the board. So I told the person that asked me, I said, I'll consider it, but only if I can still have the POCC be strong so that we continue to shine and help not only the families, but also the children. So first you get the buy-in.
Thank you for that. So we have, it's 3:28, so we have 12 minutes left to this session. We can keep moving forward though with the Q&A if anyone has questions. Well, I'll throw out a question. Can you guys give tips for navigating in the schools for parents? So once you accept and you get there, what tips can you give to the parents so that they have an active voice, or so that they don't feel like, a lot of times we hear where people feel like they're visitors versus, you know, I belong here, I live here, I'm not a visitor, I'm not visiting the campus or the school. Do you have tips for that, navigating the school as a person of color, as well as owning the school and knowing that you belong there and exuding that?
Yes, I think what helps is when you get there, you look at the space and get a sense of who the key players are, and you figure out how you can help from a strength perspective. Don't go into it from a deficit. Say, okay, I realize this, but here are some ideas you can consider incorporating, because if you go in it from a deficit model, they don't listen to you. So when we just started our group, just some parents talking, when we had our first, I think 2 or 3 meetings, families were like, we need to change the curriculum. The curriculum needs to reflect our children more. Curriculum. And I said, we'll get there. Curriculum is a huge piece. That is like the backbone of a school. And so before you can do that, you need to show up and be present. When you start showing up and being present, then you can navigate things more, because then folks are recognizing you, and then they start to say, okay, well, what are your thoughts on this? How can we create this? And then you bring folks together to execute it.
I can just, add from my sort of short experience so far. I think that, one of the things that I remember Gina saying to me early on is, once you have made the commitment to start with a school, it doesn't matter that your daughter doesn't start till the fall. Every event that you can find yourself at, be there, right? It is now your community. So I really took that to heart and made it my business to kind of go to every single event, to see how things were, to ask the questions. I attended an event this week just talking about, some of the plans post-COVID and what that looks like. And I'm asking the questions, although many of those things will not impact my daughter because she's so young, but I'm curious about what platforms they're utilizing. I'm curious about what investments they're making in remote learning that will impact the entire community. I think these are all questions to bring to the space. And I think, my approach is so much that there's nothing wrong with asking the question, right? There's nothing wrong with putting it out there in the ethos and seeing what comes back. And perhaps if it isn't something that the power to be is thinking of, then putting it in their head so that they are thinking about it because you're thinking about it. And they're serving you and your children. And so I think it's important to kind of enter the space, again, being authentic, asking the questions and being present.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I'll just add on to that. I forgot to mention, I am an alum of an independent school. My daughter was there for 13 years. And to piggyback off that, volunteering is also very key. And it could be the smallest thing, just, coming to set up, but you can't be there for the event, or breaking down. And I was on the PA, and that was something we looked for. We took any and all volunteers. And I know a lot of times we think, if I can't be there, we don't go. Or you can rotate, right? Because a lot of times your coffee hours take place maybe in the morning. So maybe you get a group of people and you say, hey, you know what? I can't take off all the time. I can't come in late. I'll switch off. I'll go this time, and spread it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to talk about the curriculum. So one of the things that always came up with the curriculum is we know schools don't let parents dictate the curriculum, right? But we can speak up and say, well, hey, there are certain topics that, one, we need to be aware of when they're going to be introduced, and two, how they're going to be introduced. So I'll speak to history, or in a sense, slavery in history. Can you guys speak to, and maybe Rashima, you may be able to speak to that more so because you've been there longer, but how have you had that conversation with the teachers or the head of school or the head of the division? I know we had some things on our ends that we did, but I'll let you speak to that. Or if anyone
so what we did, so when we have our meetings, at least one meeting or two, we have the head of the school come to the meeting. And I meet with her regularly, probably once a month. And so the families will compile their questions and concerns, share them either in that meeting with the head of school, or they will talk about them outside. We'll talk about them. And then when I meet with the head of school, I discuss them with her. And so she will take that information back to her staff, the heads of the divisions, and talk to them. Like, I remember there was one particular time where a parent in I believe it's middle school, they received information that the topic of discussion coming up, I think it was history, was the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And they gave a long list of information to go with it. But then when it was time to have the discussion about slavery, there was no mention. So some back and forth communication happened, and the parent came and shared it with me. So I had a conversation with the head of the school, and then she went back and had a conversation with the division head to figure out what happened. And their response was, the division leader's response was, well, we announced it the year prior. So I said, that doesn't even make sense, because here you have a new year, either new families, or no one's going to really remember that. You have all these months go by, summer, and so that's not good enough. So what he then did was he sent out another reminder about what was going to be covered. So you have to speak on certain things, and you don't go in with it in an accusatory manner. It's best to say, you know what, I saw this and I wonder if it could be done this way. For English, one of the parents said, you know, here's a list of books that you can consider that really reflect my child. And it's beneficial. I think we have to remember too that things that reflect our children are beneficial for all children.
That's
right? Because we're all in the space. When we leave the independent school, there's the rest of the world that we have to deal with. When they go to college, it's a whole other level of stuff that they have to deal with, right? So you just have the conversations. Be brave to have those conversations. And that's how it gets changed. I mean, now it's to a point where I've been asked to have the members of the POCC look at what the children are bringing home and see where gaps are and make some suggestions. We even compiled a list of books for all divisions that we shared with the head of the school, as well as the librarians. So it's doing things strategically and in baby steps.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We do have a question. So I see where you guys shared your email, your contact information. Please, everyone, if you want to reach out to them, you can. They are sharing their email, so feel free to reach out to them afterwards or throughout the school year for advice. We do have a question. How can families of color with parents who are not native speakers or have two parents working full-time be present and authentic in independent school spaces? And I will tell you, we have 2 minutes left.
Yes.
I'll just add, when I was attending events for sort of the enrollment process and the application process, what I found and was really refreshed by was the schools that I was applying to had many different options for events, many of them in the evenings around like 7:30. So I really appreciated that. But I'm sure if you email or you call, they'll be sure to have like translation services available, because I think that's just necessary and needed in our kind of community that is so diverse. I would also just add, at these events, it's really important to not just talk to teachers and administrators. I think every community member is valuable. So if that means that you're talking to the person in the parking lot, you're talking to the person that navigates the bus system, I think everyone is valuable in terms of trying to get a sense of the school community. So I just wanted to sort of add that.
I would add to that quickly that while I'm not a native Spanish speaker, I do speak Spanish. My daughter is also Latina, and so it was important for me for them to show me. So the simplest way I would say that is, if you are not a native speaker and you need or you desire to see how you're reflected, simply say, ask, show me. And I think that you're well within your right, and you're well within, you know, your space of opportunity to say that. And they should be willing to, if they've not already done it, do exactly that.
The other thing is showing up. Time parent, you can still do little things. There could be, usually each classroom has a classroom parent. So you can just say, you know, depending on what they may need something designed. That's your contribution. You don't always have to physically be in the space. For us, families, after a while, all of them some wanted to come to our meetings, but could not because of the time, even though it's in the evening. So what we decided to do was set up Zoom. So families that couldn't physically be in the building, they can join us virtually. So you figure out ways to break down barriers. Some had issues with childcare. We got babysitters. We give credit to the upper class students to watch the children while we have our meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So you figure out ways to remove the barriers. I see the time is 3:40.
So it is 3:40. I'm sorry, we have to end. This was a great conversation. Everyone, please, they did put their emails in the chat.